This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
(1780), 5 years into the American Revolution. Patriots and British clash in the South Carolina backcountry. The Battle of Huck's defeat helped to energize the fight for American independence. In 1766, William Bratton arrived in York County, nearly a decade before the start of the Revolutionary War. His small farm eventually grew into one of the largest pre-Civil War cotton plantations in our region.
He was one of the farmers in this area of the Carolina Piedmont who very early took an interest in cotton planting, which led him to slavery.
And within one generation, they moved from having 11 slaves in the Revolutionary War time to, in the Antebellum time period, having 139.
Today, this unique historical site provides visitors with new experiences and perspectives.
The most important part for me is, of course, telling my ancestor story and letting the people know how this plantation is here because of the work that they done.
It gives modern day people, particularly children and their families, a window into the past.
In the next half hour, we'll dig into the rich yet sometimes somber history of historic Brattonsville.
The following episode of Trail of History is brought to you by Central Piedmont Community College and viewers like you. Thank you.
And from Bragg Financial Advisors, a family-owned wealth management firm providing investment management and tax and estate planning for families, individuals, and institutions for nearly 50 years. Committed to our clients, to education, and our community.
Hello, I'm Tony Zeiss, president of Central Piedmont Community College. You know, the rich and diverse history of the Charlotte region is just wonderful, and we at the college want to bring it to you and share it. We understand the importance of history. We understand the importance of learning from the past so that we can do better in the future. I want to tell you that you're in for a real treat. The History Department at Central Piedmont Community College has partnered with our television station to bring you this special, one-of-a-kind history program. Stay tuned. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Gary Ritter, and welcome to A Trail of History. William Bratton settled right here in 1766 in what is now modern-day York County, South Carolina. Today, this living history site offers wonderful opportunities for the public to learn more about what life was like in 18th and 19th century upstate South Carolina. Troops loyal to the King of England advanced from the woods on Patriot positions. As thick musket smoke fills the air, the battle unfolds, with spectators watching from only a few feet away. It's one of 2 battle reenactments on this day at historic Brattonsville. Each summer, the site recreates the Battle of Huck's defeat, a pivotal moment during the American Revolution.
After the British took Charleston, things looked pretty bad because it seemed like the British now had the upper hand.
In July of 1780, British loyalist Captain Christian Huck received orders to capture Colonel William Bratton. But when he arrived at the Bratton home, the colonel wasn't there. Needing oats for his horses, Captain Huck moved his men to a nearby plantation. And there, Colonel Bratton and other Patriot militia confronted Captain Huck's forces.
It cannot be overstated how important it was to the backcountry effort during the American Revolution, because this really was the first time that you saw militia, you saw untrained soldiers, you saw soldiers who, when they woke up in the morning, their self-identity wasn't that of a soldier, it was that of a farmer. That's what the vast majority of the people in this area did for a living.
Captain Huck was killed in a brief skirmish which lasted about 10 minutes. It was a victory for the Americans, and the Battle of Huck's defeat marked a turning point in the American Revolution, according to historian Michael Scoggins.
You go from Huck's defeat to Kings Mountain to Cowpens in 6 months, and Lord Cornwallis is pulling his troops out of the Carolinas and heading toward Virginia, where, you know, in October 1781, he surrenders to George Washington.
It takes scores of volunteers to pull off this battle reenactment. Many immerse themselves in the 18th century way of life for the entire weekend, but more on that later. Today, Historic Brattonsville offers visitors nearly 800 acres and more than 30 structures to explore. Along with the Battle of Huck's defeat, the site hosts other large events annually, including By the Sweat of Our Brows. This event highlights the contributions enslaved African Americans made on the Bratton plantation, while also remembering the harsh reality of slavery. But in the 1760s, when William Bratton and his family first settled here, this was just a spot in the road.
Brattonsville Road was a stagecoach route from Yorkville to Chesterville.
According to Scoggins, the Scots-Irish Presbyterian family started out growing only what they needed, like corn and wheat, and raising livestock, including cattle and hogs. Eventually, the Brattons opened a tavern and store in this small white house. William and his wife Martha eventually had 8 children, 2 boys and 6 girls. William Bratton fought and served as a militia commander during the American Revolution.
He rose from the rank of captain at the beginning of the war to colonel by 1780 and commanded a regiment in General Thomas Sumter's militia brigade and fought throughout the American Revolution. And after the Revolution, William Bratton was probably the most progressive of his family. He was not only a farmer, he served in the state government, he was a local sheriff, he was a county justice of the peace. He was kind of a mover and shaker, whereas most of his siblings seemed to be content to be farmers.
But agriculture played an essential part in the Bratton family's wealth.
He began expanding his plantation and purchasing more land, and not only planting subsistence crops, but also planting cotton as a cash crop.
Colonel William Bratton saw an opportunity. Cash crops are those grown for their commercial value.
And he was one of the farmers in this area of the Carolina Piedmont who very early took an interest in cotton planting, which led him to slavery.
And it was slavery, along with the invention of the cotton gin, that made cotton profitable.
In the upcountry, the cotton gin really does start things rolling. The type of cotton that grows well in the upcountry is very labor intensive to clean and process.
You were able to take that new cash crop, the short staple cotton, and turn it from something that prior to the invention of this machine was not economically viable. And then by the 19th century, this is how you begin to see the South make money. This right here is just a snapshot of the growth of the South in the late 18th and early 19th centuries.
Colonel Bratton, William Bratton, was among the early men in this area who purchased a cotton gin. And of course the Brattons continued that tradition well into the early 20th century of growing cotton. There was a cotton gin on the plantation for most of its history.
Colonel Bratton died in 1815, and his wife Martha died the following year. Their son, Dr. John Bratton, inherited the plantation.
The second son, John Simpson Bratton, took over where his father's left off by continuously expanding the size of his plantation, adding more and more acreage, not only right there at Brattonsville, but elsewhere in York County and Chester County, planting more cotton, buying more slaves.
In 1823, Dr. Bratton started construction of a larger home for his family across the road from his parents' house. Today, historians at the site call it the Homestead House. The large plantation home stands as a clear example of antebellum architecture. Clad in white clapboard siding with tall green shutters, it features an expansive front porch and matching second-story balcony.
With his large family and his mercantile interest, his medical practice, he became one of the prominent men in York County of his day.
Inside, visitors can walk through spacious rooms with period furniture, like this one, set up as Dr. Bratton's medical study.
The building behind the homestead that's connected is the assembly hall. that we refer to it as, and the upstairs is where they would have done entertaining, dinner parties. Downstairs is kind of an interesting mystery on what happened down there. We believe that it wouldn't have had any cooking going on, but it could have been a warming station. So when the food came from the outdoor kitchen, it wasn't quite ready to go upstairs to the assembly hall. It could have gone downstairs to the warming station to keep the food warm until it was ready to be served.
Outside the main house, there's a tiny structure with a metal roof, an original slave cabin constructed of handmade bricks. It's uncommon to find one made of brick, but for Dr. Bratton, it was a symbol of status and wealth. If you look closely, you might find handprints in a few bricks, likely those of the slaves who made them. It's a reminder that much of the Bratton wealth before the Civil War was built on the backs of slaves.
The Brattons were one of the largest slave-owning families in York County. When Dr. Bratton died in 1843, he had 139 slaves and 6,000 acres.
In 1854, a third-generation Bratton, John Bratton Jr., the son of Dr. John Bratton, started construction of Hightower House, located 3/4 of a mile down the road from the Homestead House. The 7,000 square foot Italian villa-style home took 2 years to construct. But the Bratton family's standard of living was about to change. The economic model of slavery abruptly ended following the Civil War.
Right after the American Civil War, you see the riches of the Brattons diminish pretty severely. They go from having an estimated worth of $115,000 in 1860 to about $700 in 1870. The American Civil War really took its toll on the Brattons.
The Bratton plantation peaked at 6,000 acres. The invention of the cotton gin, combined with slavery, set the Bratton family on an upward financial trajectory. But the 13th Amendment and post-Civil War Reconstruction era marked a major turning point for the plantation.
In the early 20th century, most of the Brattons moved away from Brattonsville. After about 1915, Brattonsville was primarily run by tenant farmers.
And many of the tenant farmers were former Bratton slaves or their descendants.
And gradually, particularly after World War II, when cotton planting became less viable, less economically feasible, Brattonsville was gradually abandoned by active farmers. It ceased to be an active plantation by the 1950s.
As a result, the large homes and other buildings fell into a state of disrepair. But community leaders envisioned a new chapter in the story of the once grand plantation.
So slowly but surely, the county, along with help from other agencies like the Nation Ford Land Trust, Friends of Historic Brattonsville, the state of South Carolina, raised the funds to buy the property at Brattonsville and begin the long process of cleaning up the site and restoring it to something of its former appearance.
In 1971, the National Register of Historic Places designated the collection of buildings and surrounding land as the Historic Brattonsville District. York County owns most of the property today, but the Homestead House still belongs to the Bratton family. The house is leased to York County for use by the Culture and Heritage Museums, the organization which operates the site. This historic destination is unique because it showcases a diverse collection of buildings and presents visitors with a wide range of historic interpretation.
When we say interpretation, when I mean interpretation, what that means is that even though a structure may be built a little later, a little bit earlier, what we're doing is we're utilizing the structure as a typical house of a period. So architecture in the upstate South Carolina didn't change very much for hundreds of years. So even though something may have been built in the 1820s, it was very indicative of what life was like in the 1780s, 1790s. We're able to take the interior of that and utilize what we have to portray a time that we've decided upon. So right now we have interpretation from 1750s, 1780s, 1840s, and soon 1870s. So we're looking at 4 distinct time periods that we dress in different clothing with, we have different activities with, we have different outreaches with, we have different programs for the community so that they can come and experience these separate time periods all in one area. It's very much like a colonial Williamsburg. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. Colonial Williamsburg was a very affluent town in the 18th century, whereas we are a very affluent farming community. So you're looking at a slice of upstate South Carolina, whereas Colonial Williamsburg represents a slice of coastal Virginia.
Back on the battlefield, a barrage of musket fire comes from the tree line. Robert Riles charges forward, takes aim, and fires. The Patriot militia advances across the field of dry grass. It's a brief encounter, and the victory goes to the Americans. Every July, Revolutionary War reenactors converge on historic Brattonsville. They come here for the Battle of Huck's defeat. Riles leads Bratton's brigade.
Well, what it involves is mustering the forces, doing a quick inspection of the arms. We emphasize safety first whenever we do these historical reenactments. We always make sure that the guns are cleared, that there aren't any projectiles that are coming out of these real weapons that would have been used during that time period.
With such realism, the crowds get a new perspective of 18th century warfare.
Kind of made you think about how bad the actual battles would be and how many actual casualties.
You see what it would actually be like if you were standing there. It makes it very personal.
Many reenactors immerse themselves in 18th century life for the entire two-day event. They camp in tents, cook over campfires, and of course, look the part.
They want to have the experience that they're trying to tell others about. If you're staying at a hotel and then you come on site, you're not living the entire life. You're not actually portraying the entirety of a person's existence. But some fellas, they'll come to the site, they'll just eat green corn, they'll just eat vegetables that were in season. It's a better way for them to understand, and if their understanding is that much richer, then they're going to be able to portray that understanding, to deliver that understanding to the public.
For many of these reenactors, taking part in events like this is a hobby. And like most hobbies, you learn as you go.
I got introduced to reenacting 7 or 8 years ago. I had never sewed at all before I started reenacting. And when I first came, I was wearing borrowed clothes, and I was going to buy me some clothes. But the guys in my camp shamed me into making this. They were like, "We're all middle-aged men and we sewed our own clothes. You have to sew yours." So I had to teach myself how to sew.
Every one of these reenactors, the vast majority of them, the clothes that they're wearing, they made them themselves. The accoutrements they had, they've spent their hard-earned money trying to make their impression better, trying to make that history come alive for people that otherwise they wouldn't be able to see it.
Historian Bob Bemis says it's important to present history in creative ways.
And as a professional historian, I spent the vast majority of my not only my professional career, but my adult life researching history and trying to teach to as many different types of people, different types of history. And you understand people learn different ways. You have tactile learners, you have sensory learners, you have people who want to just read a book. Well, the great thing about this place, the great thing about historic sites like this, you can do all of those. You can do all of those in a day. I can light up the blacksmith's forge and I can make you something. You can smell it while I'm making it, you can see it, you can feel it, the whole 9 yards, or we can discuss the literature that you have here on site as well.
With a needle and thread in hand, Sandra Burris sews in the shade. She wears a long blue dress, plaid shawl, and a straw hat.
I typically play the character of Letty. She was a seamstress here on the plantation in the 1800s. And we do know for a fact that she was one of the slaves here during that time.
The staff and interpreters at Historic Brattonsville make it a point to tell all of the plantation's history, both the good and the bad.
People want to know how the slaves were treated. They want to know who the slaves were here. And for the most part, we don't know how the slaves were treated because they were considered a piece of property, so we don't have a whole lot of great records on them. What we do have, we find in letters that family members wrote each other.
Every September, the site hosts By the Sweat of Our Brow to share the experience of those once enslaved on the Brattonsville plantation. Interpreters demonstrate cotton ginning and doll making, while others share stories and folklore. Then there's the dirty job of brickmaking.
Just clay dirt and water and sand.
Children dig their hands into the dark copper-colored mud to form handmade bricks that are fired on site. Bricks similar to those used to construct this slave cabin prior to the Civil War. Angela Green and her cousin, Lisa Bratton, spent a night in the cabin with several others, a very personal experience for both. Their great-great-grandparents were enslaved at Brattonsville.
I take away a sense of pride. Some people might feel shame. They might not want to admit that maybe their ancestors had been slaves because maybe they feel shame. But I feel pride. I mean, they were here, they persevered, and because of them, I'm here. Had it not been for Green Bratton and Melinda Bratton, there wouldn't be an Angela Green today.
Lisa Bratton says some things were uncomfortable.
I was freezing cold, and part of that was good for me because I said, now my great-great-grandmother wouldn't have been able to, go get a hotel or go back to the car and get another sweater or get a jacket. And so I just kind of intentionally just dealt with that. And it kind of put me in the space where she might have been.
While this event gives these cousins a way to connect with their family's past, By the Sweat of Our Brow also provides many other descendants of the plantation slaves a chance to share their ancestors' stories.
I'm the descendant of one of those families, which is Crawford, on the sign behind me.
In 2003, historian Michael Scoggins transcribed an 1865 document, a list of first names, names which belonged to freedmen or former slaves of Harriet Bratton, many who continued living on the plantation after the Civil War. These papers directly connect York County resident Wally Cathcart to his great-grandmother.
Her name was Lila, and it just floored me. I heard this, but to see documentation where my great-grandmother Lila, her name on it, and her two children, you could not imagine how elated I was. It took me a while to come down from that.
Former slaves with only first names, like Cathcart's great-grandmother, took last names or surnames in the years following the Civil War. At Brattonsville, there were 7 surnames.
The 7 families were the names that were taken after the Civil War, the surnames that they took, and there were 7 of them, Bratton being one of them. And so we refer to them as the 7 sacred families that are out here, those that are descendants from those that were once enslaved here on the historic Brattonsville plantation.
Along with Bratton, the other family surnames include Crawford, Feaster or Femster, Lowry, Moore, Smith, and Thompson.
What is Green Bratton going to do? Nothing. Okay.
During this presentation at the 2015 By the Sweat of Our Brows event, Lisa Bratton, who's also an associate professor at Tuskegee University in Alabama, shares what she's discovered while researching her own family's link to historic Brattonsville. She says it's important to remember the complete story of the plantation.
I really do appreciate that Brattonsville is telling the other side of the story. We are talking about enslavement. We're talking about the lynching of Jim Williams that happened here. We're talking about race, and it's okay to say the word slave to me. I'm not offended by the fact that my family was slaves here, were enslaved here. It is part of my legacy.
A legacy to which the descendants and organizers pay tribute.
Melinda, Letty, Lydia.
On the porch of the large plantation house, descendants of the slaves read the names of their ancestors who were once denied their freedom but played a major role at Brattonsville. Event organizer Celeste Scherer.
Because at the end of the day, the reason why we have descendants here is because someone survived slavery. And that's the story with most African Americans, that someone survived, and that is why we are here today. So we want to honor those that did survive, and those that didn't, we still want to honor them too for the work that they did, and they probably helped and motivated someone to make it past slavery.
Sam, Amy, Alex.
When you visit historic Brattonsville, it doesn't take long to see the amount of work and passion invested in preserving the site. It's a monumental task for the staff and volunteers. Whether it's a large battle reenactment,
we are passionate about this because we are passionate about education, and we want to bring education in a very accessible way to the public.
Or remembering those who lived here.
I take away so much. I just feel so blessed to be able to do this work, to work with the descendants, to carry on and share the stories of those that didn't have a voice back then, so they can have a voice now and reach out to their descendants, their ancestors, and also have the public feel inspired to hear this story and work with us.
From battle reenactments portraying pivotal moments in history to stories of those enslaved, Historic Brattonsville offers visitors a rare opportunity to connect with the past in a way that makes words in a history book come alive in an engaging way. I'm Gary Ritter. Thanks for watching this episode of A Trail of History.
A production of PBS Charlotte.